Greetings, brothers and sisters. I am Father Aaron Leach. I know it's been a long time, so welcome back. And, well, I guess let's talk about Coronzom.
How about new?
Okay. I make a little fun. But it is actually true. In the diaries of Dr. John Dee, Coronzom is listed as the true name of Satan in the language of the angels. And by the way, it is Coronzom with an M, not an N. The N was a typo that originated in Merritt Cosbon's edition of Dee's Journals, which was the only edition of Dee's Journals that was available to the public for a very long time. Because of that, the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, and others who have popularized and utilized Enochian magic have tended to use the N because they had not referenced Dee's original journals. But in the original journals, in his own handwriting, it is definitely an M. So his name is Coronzon. Now, when the angels revealed the name Coronzon to Dee, they were specifically referring in that journal entry, they were talking about Adam in the Garden of Eden. And they referred to Coronzom as the devil who assailed and overcame Adam in the garden. Now, elsewhere in the Key of the Ethers, we have another reference to Satan, where he is referred to as him who is fallen. But interestingly, if we look at the angelical words that are actually here at this part in the key, they don't say him who is fallen. They translate as death dragon, Tilach Vovium. So we might be forgiven for jumping to the conclusion that this would be an accurate representation of who Coronzom really is. But, as is usually the case, it's a little more complex than that. Remember, Satan isn't a name, it's a title. And there have been a lot of different entities that have held that title over the centuries. Samael, Lucifer, Asmodeus, Beelzebub, Yaldabaoth, we're going to come back to him, and many other entities have been just kind of plastered with the name of Satan, depending on your tradition, your time and place. Some of those names are more from the Jewish tradition. Obviously, Lucifer is more from the Christian tradition. So what we do know for a fact is that Coronzom is a name for Satan, but the question remains, which Satan? Now, to explain that, we're going to have to take a couple of brief detours. First, just for those of you who aren't aware of it, I want to highlight the intimate relationship that exists between John Dee's Enochian system and ancient Gnosticism. If you've read my work, then you've seen me bring up Gnosticism a million times throughout my analysis of Dee's system. There are a lot of similarities between the ancient Gnostic doctrines and cosmology, especially, and what Dee would later record in his journals. Just to give some examples here. The Gnostics believed that there were 30 heavens instead of the more traditional Judeo-Christian 7 heavens. And in John Dee's system, lo and behold, we have 30 ethers, which is another way of saying 30 heavens. Sophia, which is wisdom. In Gnosticism, she is the mother of angels. In the Enochian system, we have Galva, who is referred to by the angels as wisdom. And in Dee's journal, she is referred to as the mother of angels. And the big one that's going to really interest us for this discussion, is that in Gnosticism, they called the creator god Yaldabaoth, and they gave him the title the god of justice or the god of righteousness. In the Enochian system, the angelic name of God is Yad Balto, and that translates as God of justice or God of righteousness. Now, before I go on, I have to explain there's a very big difference between Gnosticism and the Enochian cosmology. The old Gnostics, the original Gnostics, the ones we call the Sethian Gnostics, they considered the creator of the universe, who they called Yaldabaoth, to be Satan. Now remember, in the New Testament, Satan is described as the prince of this world. And there's also the scene where Satan comes to tempt Jesus before the crucifixion and says, if you'll give up this plan of yours, I will give you all the kingdoms of the earth. And the idea was that the kingdoms of the earth were Satan's to give. So it's an established biblical canon that Satan is kind of in charge of the physical world. And Gnosticism really took that to heart and elevated Satan to the position, I should say, of being the creator of time and space. But meanwhile, the Enochian system takes the more Judeo-Christian view, where there is no difference between the creator of the universe and God himself. So in Dee's Enochian system, Yad Balto is a name of God. It's not a name for Satan. And Coronzom did not create the world in the Enochian system. So I just want to make that clear, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm just applying the Gnostic cosmology to the Enochian system whole cloth. There are differences, and they are important. Okay, so back to Coronzon himself. He may not have created the universe in the Enochian cosmology, but he is very intimately connected to the structure and the function of the universe. And to understand that, I first have to introduce you to this guy. His name is Ion. He is a Greek deity, and he was worshipped as the embodiment of all time and space. He is eternity.
I see it. Eternity.
You'll notice that he is surrounded by the belt of the zodiac, because this represents the cycle of the sun through the year in an endless cycle. You'll notice that he is being entwined by a serpent. This is the Ouroboros serpent. This is the serpent that bites his own tail and constantly moves in an endless loop, also representing endless cycles and eternal cycles. You might notice a striking similarity between this ancient Greek figure and this tarot card, the World. The figure in the center has become a young female instead of a young male, but otherwise everything else is still there. She is still surrounded by the belt of the zodiac, and the serpent has become a scarf, because I think at the time the Smith weight deck was being drawn, the serpent symbolism was, they were trying to avoid that, But yeah, it's still there. The scarf there represents the Ouroboros serpent entwining about her. So this is very likely the origin of that tarot card. And interestingly enough, that tarot card is associated with Saturn. And the reason that's interesting is because Ion here could be represented as an old man as well. And when he was represented as an old man, the Greeks associated him very closely with Kronos, and later in Rome he would be known as Saturn. So he's the god of time. He is literally Father Time. In fact, we use the same symbolism in our secular year. Whenever we reach the new year, we symbolize the old year as an old man who's getting ready to pass away, and we symbolize the new year as baby New Year, with a little diaper in the sash with the New Year's number on it. And by the end of the coming year, by the end of that year, that baby will be an old man. He'll pass away, and he'll give way to a young new year, and it just goes on again. It's cyclic, it's infinite, it's eternal. Now you'll also notice, and this is important for us, that there's also a lion-headed form of Ion, and this is called the Mithraic Ion. This is very specific to the cult of Mithras, which was essentially the religion of the Roman army, and would later form much of the basis of the Roman Christian religion. But of course, that's getting into Rome, and I want to keep things mostly centered on Greece for this. But yes, there was a Mithraic Ion who had the lion's head, and we will see him again. So let's start bringing everything together. And we're going to take a look at the Gnostic image of Yaldabaoth. Look familiar? The Gnostics appear to have adopted the image of the Mithraic Ion as their image of Satan, or that is Yaldabaoth, the prince of this world. Now, the Gnostics were staunchly anti-astrology. That is, they believed that mankind should not be ruled by or bound by fate or the stars. And they depicted their version of Satan as the Greek embodiment of cyclic eternity. Now, they believed in reincarnation, and that most people were stuck in an endless cycle of rebirth and suffering and death, And they wanted off that wheel. It was very Buddhist of them. I suspect some shared information between those groups. So, to the Gnostics, the being who embodies the cyclic eternity of the universe was the bad guy, whose torment they were seeking to escape. So finally, let's bring all of this back to Coronzom himself. I've already mentioned the Gnostic underpinnings of the Enochian system, and you can read a lot more about that in my Angelical language books. But I've also made it clear that Coronzom is not the demiurge. That is, he didn't create the world. Oh, and as for these journals, what I've already mentioned here is all there is in the journals. The one entry that names him Coronzom and links him to the fall from Eden, and the later mention of him as he who has fallen. So we're not given any further information. So what then do we have left that might shed some light on Coronzom and link him to all of these ideas of the Greek ion and Father Time that I've covered in this video? And that thing will be his name. Now, before we discuss the etymology of the name Coronzom in the Angelical language, I want to first point out this notation in Coronzom's entry in my Angelical lexicon. This comes from the late, great scholar and magician Rob Thomas, who is better known in the occult communities as Zadkiel. Zadkiel did some research on the name Coronzom throughout previous Solomonic literature in the hopes that he could find either the name Coronzom as a barbarous name in a previous work, or at least a precursor to it. And it appears that he was successful. In the very influential grimoire, it's an Arabic text called the Picatrix, he found a name, Hakoronos. Now, it seems fairly likely that the name Hakoronos is a combination of a Greek word, the name of the god Kronos, with a Hebrew affix, ha, meaning of. So, Hakoronos very likely means of Kronos. Then it's not a very long journey to get from the Picatrix's Hakoronos to John Dee's Coronzon. Now, Angelical, much like Biblical Hebrew, works via very simple root words, very short collections of maybe 2 or 3 letters that are then expanded with affixes and compounding and such. The root of the name Coronzom seems to be the letters C-O-R. And if we seek other words in the Angelical lexicon that share the C-O-R root, what we find are words that have to do with numbering and counting. It's no stretch to go from there to the concept of time. Seconds and minutes and hours ticking off of a clock, passage of days and years on a calendar. Just keeping track of time is all about counting. And if we look at things from Dee's very Christian perspective, time, and that is capital T time, was counting down. It was running out until what he believed would be the end times were to begin, thereby associating the entire concept with the Antichrist, the apocalypse, and with Satan in general, because he firmly believed that very dark times were coming because time was running out. Now, it turns out there's another root word to be found in Coronzom's name, and it just so happens to be the final 2 letters, O and M. This, by the way, is why the M is very important to restore in his name, because O and M, or translate in Angelical as the word for to know or to understand. Now, you see, in the Jewish system, God's throne, or at least the base of God's throne, was said to rest upon the 7th heaven, the highest heaven, which happens to be the sphere of Saturn. And that same sphere is also called by the name Binah, which is understanding. Now, in this aspect, Jewish tradition gives God several titles, such as He who sits upon the throne, or the Ancient of Days, which is a very Saturnian title to give to God. And from there, it was adopted by the Gnostics, who applied such terms as Ancient of Days to the demiurge. So here, once again, we can see a relationship between the highest sphere, Saturn, of knowledge, and the demiurge, and therefore the angelical word for knowledge appears in the name of Coronzon, the god of time. Coronzom is Father Time, who holds both the hourglass and the scythe. He is entropy. He is the natural movement of the universe from a state of order to a state of chaos. He is why everything and everyone grows old and passes away. He is why biological matter rots, why buildings fall apart, why nature tries to reclaim civilization, and why you and I will someday die. He's even the reason, by the way, that you can't keep your house clean for more than 5 minutes at a time. Good old entropy, natural chaos. So you can see why the angels would call him the death dragon, always pursuing Adam, always killing the things we love, always breaking the things that we enjoy, always making it hard to maintain order and civilization, whether on a personal or a societal level. And if you still want to focus on the badass dragon imagery, well, I'd say this isn't a creature I'd want to run into in a dark alley anytime soon. Or you could just settle on the good old-fashioned seven-headed dragon from the Book of Revelation imagery if you wanted to. Just keep in mind, Coronzom also looks like this. And these images have something important to say about Coronzom and the force that he embodies in our universe. And I think that's about all I have to say about Coronzom. Anything else would just be further exploration into the figure of Satan, or maybe even Kronos or Saturn. And these are all things that you can definitely look up and go deeper down the rabbit hole on your own. But I want to thank you for your time. Always remember to like and subscribe and ring that spirit bell to summon us to your inbox when we do produce new material, which we will be producing a lot more material this year. And blessed be.